Hello, I'm Lesley Pyne, author of Finding Joy Beyond Childlessness and blogger and all-round creative. And we're here, Cali and myself, talking about chapter 4 of Big Magic, Persistence. So I'm going to hand straight over to Cali.
Thank you. Yes, my name's Cali Bird. I love to blog about creativity. I do that at Gentle Creative. And I also write. It's one of my books, recently out this year. If you're into talk or handbags, check it out. And that wouldn't have come about without this book, Big Magic. So we're on part 4. We discuss in each of these episodes one of the chapters of Big Magic, and we're on 4 of 6. And it's a whopper, isn't it, this chapter, Lesley? And there's a lot in it. Quite profound stuff. So it's about persistence. And this week, we've each found something that has really spoken to us, haven't we?
We have.
And actually different points, because usually it's the same stuff we rave about, but it's been quite different this week, which is quite interesting. So I'm going to start on mine, and then we'll hear more from Lesley. So about 10-15 pages into this chapter, Elizabeth Gilbert starts talking about making art, doing creative things, and having a day job. And I certainly fall into this. In an ideal world, it would be great not to have the job. It would be great to have an abundance of time and energy. She talks about how it would be great, say if you had it's like your spouse or someone else who could support you. She talks about the concept of a studio wife. You know, you just sit there and create and do all that stuff, and someone else that takes responsibility for all the other things. Now, if you've got that, fantastic. But most of us haven't, and I certainly haven't. I work part-time in my day job. I've got sort of in recent years had more family responsibilities, not kids, I don't have kids, but I've had elderly parents. My husband's had some health issues recently. So there's lots going on in my life that takes away from the day job. And I must admit, I do spend time thinking, I wish it wasn't like this. I wish I had that. I wish I was like this person. And she actually comes in sort of quite a stern rebuke, actually. It's on page 154, I have it bookmarked. Because she said, you know, what we're searching for is, it'd be great if everything was a nice safe room and we could do our creativity. And she says, this is a world, not a room. You can look after yourself in this world while looking at what's more, there is a profound sense of honour to be found in looking after yourself. And that honour will resonate powerfully in your work. It will make your work stronger. So there's a bit of finger wagging here. But I also love this because it also vindicates what I'm doing, because it's hard sometimes. It's hard to be motivated. It's hard to drag myself out of bed before I have to, before I do my day job or anything else. And then she goes on to say that and then she finishes this section talking about people who, get up in the morning to write before their job. Many authors have done that. She gives an example of a couple who are both illustrators, but they work full time. That's where the lion's share of their income comes. But every morning they get up out early and spend an hour quietly drawing. And she says, people don't do this kind of thing because they have I'll start again. People don't do this kind of thing because they have all kinds of extra energy and time for it. They do this kind of thing because their creativity matters to them enough that they are willing to make all kinds of extra sacrifices for it. And I just really feel that spoke to me because, I do make these sacrifices and it is tiring. And sometimes you do think, am I crazy for doing this? Yeah. But she makes the point later in this chapter that actually, your creativity will send you crazy if you don't do it. So, if you're out there toiling away and it's hard and you wish you didn't have to work, but you're doing it anyway, well done. That's honourable. You're doing the right thing. Please keep doing it. Yeah. Let's club together and keep supporting each other. Exactly. As Lesley supports me often.
That's right. I think that's so true, isn't it? And she also talks about having an affair with your creativity, doesn't she? And she's sitting there looking a real mess and just still in her pajamas or whatever, and treating it like a lover. So get yourself cleaned up, get dressed, comb your hair, whatever, and then you feel better. I mean, I know when I was writing my book, I didn't write at my desk. I wrote slightly at the side of my desk, because just created that right environment. You know, I put on some nice music or no music, whichever felt right. But it was like creating that right, the circumstances, you know, the environment where, I mean, we talked before, didn't we, about sort of being gentle with your creativity, one of the inspiration. And if you're gentle with it, it's more likely to find you, isn't it? So that's that.
Yeah.
Create the
she
time.
talks about playing lightly, doesn't she?
Yeah.
And your day job do the heavy lifting work, so your creativity can play lightly.
That's right. And some of it is a bit like the artist state, isn't it? In the artist way, where you go off and maybe do some other things to help to get your creativity flowing. But it's just keep going, isn't it? That's the thing, really.
Yeah.
I mean, have you got any tips that about yours that you've for yourself?
Well, to be honest, I mean, there's two schools of thoughts. I mean, you talk about creating the right environment. Sometimes that's great if you can, but many of time I have written in a train where there's not enough leg room, where I can't get my laptop back far enough to the seat in front, and I'm typing like this.
Yes, yeah.
But I'm like, well, I've got this 15 minutes, 20 minutes on the train to do this, and that's all the time I've got today. Or I say, oh, the train's too cramped, I can't do it. And I choose to do it. So, you know, it works both ways. It's great when you can have time and space. And certainly people, you know, have rituals because it just puts you in that creative mindset. You get on with it. So you no longer wait till you feel with it. You do the ritual so you do feel like doing it. But equally, there's times you just have to do it on a cramped train if that's all the time you've got today. So it both works for different circumstances, I think.
Yes. And it's that, what are you willing to give up, isn't it? And I'm imagining, and I gave up quite a lot of things, people, you know, while I was writing. But maybe you don't have to do that, but maybe you give up 15 minutes of scrolling social media to do a blog, you know, to start doing something else. That's the other thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can always find a few minutes, can't you, actually?
Yeah.
Yeah,
you can, and it's amazing what you can do in those pockets of time, which I think is the point she's making. You can steal time here and there, and it's worth doing that.
Yes, exactly. Exactly worth it. And you know, lots of 15 minutes go a long way, don't they?
Absolutely. So what's it about this chapter that got to you then, Lesley?
Well, perfectionism.
Oh, that one.
That one. Yeah. There's the quote, which I've read this to a few friends this week, and they've all nodded. I think perfectionism is just a high-end haute couture version of fear. I think perfectionism is just fear in fancy shoes and a mink coat, pretending to be elegant when actually it's just terrified. Because underneath that shiny veneer, perfectionism is nothing more than a deep existential angst that says again and again, I am not good enough and I will never be good enough. Ow. No.
Crunch, isn't it?
And
so what's that? What's that mean to you?
Well, I head off to Brené Brown and Daring Greatly, because she talks quite a bit about perfectionism, in that that perfectionism is the belief that if we do things perfectly, we can minimize and avoid the pain of blame, judgment, and shame. And it's all at its core. It's about earning approval. What will people think? So but it's unattainable, isn't it? I mean,
yeah, you can't be perfect. There isn't perfect.
Exactly. I mean, Liz talks herself about the signature of all things, and that there's a character in there that's not quite a bit undeveloped. And several of her first readers said, well, there's a character in there, but she decided just to leave it, and you know, the world came up tomorrow, didn't it? So the sun came up tomorrow. So it's like, so if we have that perfectionism belief that I'm not good enough, you know, we keep well, it's self-perpetuating, isn't it? Because nothing is ever perfect. Nothing can be perfect. I mean, we could all go back through our book and find mistakes and errors or things that we want to change. So when you do that, you sort of perpetuate that myth that I'm not good enough, don't you? It's that story that just keeps coming and coming and coming. And actually, for me, it was interesting. I was talking in my crafting group last week. I just floated the what's perfectionism, and everybody said that it was more important for things to be perfect when they were doing them for other people. You know, I think, well, we were just talking before we started recording, what do you do when you're cooking at home? If you're just cooking for you or whoever you live with, you probably don't care quite so much. But if people are coming over to eat, share it, then it's a whole bigger thing, isn't it? It's a whole big deal. So yeah, and so I've always thought of myself as, I'm not perfectionism. Perfection is not an issue for me. But when I think about that not good enough, then it is. It's like, bugger. It's you know, I'm not trying to attain perfection, but there is a I do, you know, things. Yeah, looking at what do people think is probably a bit of a thing for me, actually.
I think this helped me when I first read like Big Magic a few years ago, because I think she helped me put the distance between me and my work, because we get so embroiled with it. And I think she, you know, and I think we've talked about this a couple of times now, there's a separation between when you're doing it, it's for you, and when it's done, there's nothing you can do. It's out in the world. People will make of it what they will.
There is that. Yes.
Your part of it is done, and you've got to keep creating anyway. I mean, the chapter name is Persistence, and she's got great, you know, she's dealt well with rejection over the years, I think. Because it's all very well, you know, it's easy to look at her now and go, oh, Eat, Pray, Love. Yeah, if I'd sold 10 million copies, I'd, you know, I'd feel okay about it too. But that, you know, she has got there through years of writing in obscurity. She tells a great anecdote in here where she'd written a short story, sent it off to an editor of a journal, of a magazine somewhere, and the editor had sort of come back and said, yeah, it's very nice, but I'm not sure about the ending. Sort of what I call a nice rejection, where it's not an outright no on a photocopied letter. It's no with encouragement. And then I think it's in the chapter before, she always talks about every time a rejection comes in, she bats a story back out over the net. She had this rule that when a rejection came in, she would put another story out into the world until she could just wear people down. And she tells this great anecdote that, so she did this over a number of years, and then eventually she had a literary agent, and the agent sent the same story to the same editor, and it was a few years later. Then the editor came back and raved about it. She said, oh, it really evokes something. I don't know what it is. I really liked it. And it was the same story, same ending. And Liz is quietly sort of, you know, questioning her, are you sure you liked it? And the editor's, yeah, it was fabulous. And I think, you know, that again, that's a story of persistence. A, and persistence of doing it, and B, those results where, you know, again, when you talk about success and what does success mean, and when it means, you know, getting a bigger audience and then potentially money goes with it, that comes because you've been persistent in obscurity, I suppose, doesn't it? Or just doing it anyway.
Yes, yeah. I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? Just keep going. Because there's another bit earlier on, I think, when she talks about learning her patterns of, emotional patterns of creativity. This is the stage when I wish I'd never got engaged with this idea at all. So that's that, you know, and I think the persistence, perfectionism, wanting to do it as well as you can, learning that, okay, well, this is the time it's got hard, then this is the time sometimes I might be tempted to give up because I can't do it as well as I want to do it, or for whatever reason. So it's that, you know, back to fear and courage that we spoke about right at the beginning, isn't it?
Yeah, how to do it anyway, isn't it? Or in spite of that.
Yeah. I just, the other thing that hit me about perfectionism was, and a friend mentioned this actually, she said one of the ways she gets around it is by not trying, and therefore it's not, you know, I didn't try very hard, therefore it doesn't matter if. And I thought, that's quite interesting, isn't it? I know I've done that myself, actually.
You can do it in a more playful way then. Yeah, when you take the pressure off yourself.
But then that isn't, but not trying means, well, I don't know, that's sort of giving up in a way. That's not.
It could be either way, couldn't it? Because you can view it in terms of I'm not going to try it, and therefore I am going to produce something crap.
Yes.
And then I can distance myself from it.
Yeah.
But it could also mean
Yeah.
I'm not. Sometimes when you don't try so hard, then you're more playful and you're taking the pressure off yourself. And actually, then that's like playing a game with yourself and then telling yourself it doesn't matter, and then you're freer.
That's a good way of looking at it, actually, isn't it? Yeah.
It can work either way.
Yeah.
Because I think you do have to play games. I have to play games with myself some through until, you know, when I'm drafting new blogs, it's like, well, just write for 20 minutes, see what happens. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect. It might not go anywhere. Just have a go until, you know, until 9 o'clock in the morning, until 10 or whatever. Just have a go for half an hour, then you can go make a cup of tea. So you kind of have to cut those deals with yourself and take the pressure off. Yes. And at those times, actually, that's when you produce, when it's actually not so bad, and that frees you up to do something. I liked the thing in here. She talks about, it's earlier in the chapter, about she calls it the shit sandwich. Excuse the language, but she wrote it. And it is taking that rough with the smooth, because again, we often have an idealized view. I love to write, but I can't bear the rejection, so I won't do it. And we use that as an excuse not to do it. And she says, in any endeavor, you know, if you want to be a lawyer, you know, well, then the crap, you want to be a comedian, you're not prepared for that downside. Exactly. You're not going to get to do the upside. And it all comes back to how much do you want to do this, and how much are you called to do it? And if you're really called to do it, then and she talks about, then, you know, you'll eat the shit sandwich, and she talks about, well, I'll eat someone else's as well if that's what it takes, you know.
Well, that's a sort of rule,
and I liked that, but I think just knowing that it's not great.
The rule is that, you know, the more you do stuff, the better you get at it, don't you? That's the thing. You know, I've got a couple of embroidery projects, and one, it's just got a little bit hard, and I've put it to the side for a moment, because we're recording this in November, and I'm doing some Christmassy things, but there could be a temptation to put it away because it's got hard. But no, that there's a point here. I've just trying to find it. About the bit that how you grew, if you like, while you did it. That's yours, whatever the outcome. I mean, I grew a huge amount while I was writing my book.
I remember.
I've always got that. I mean, I at the end of the day, that was the hidden purpose of writing it, I guess. But, you know, I've always got that to keep whatever the outcome is. You know, but the same with you, with yours. You know, that's perfect or not, but you persisted hugely. I mean, you're an example to all of us in persistence. Really.
It's not a middle name. I have it tattooed here, but I do, and it is. I really enjoyed reading this because it said what you're doing is okay. You're doing it, and it doesn't matter. The other stuff doesn't, and whatever tricks it takes to do that.
Yes.
So how are we on time? And are we coming up?
We've got to 18 and a half minutes, so we could.
It was. Do you want to do a takeaway? What's your?
Well, I'm just going to read that quote. The merits of that creative venture are mine to keep forever, and the time was wonderfully well spent. So I think that's that. It's just that turning it round to say, what did I gain from that? Isn't it?
Yeah.
That's that. Yeah. I mean, I guess a couple of takeaways, mainly about perfectionism, and that I thought.
Yeah, go on.
It wasn't an issue for me, and it actually is. So that's something to work on. Actually, damn. The merits of reading things several times, because the quote that I read out before, I hadn't noticed it the first time, and you know, I'm reading the Big Magic. This is the third time I'm reading it, and it's singing to me an awful lot more. But yeah. So that's mine. Yeah.
I must admit, this is probably the third or fourth time I've read it, and I love the fact we're going through it with a tooth comb, because I'm seeing stuff I've not noticed before, or maybe it's just right for this time. As I say, this chapter is very pertinent for me. I think my takeaway is that conditions aren't perfect. She talks about Herman Melville, who wrote like Moby Dick, and how he wrote to a friend how he wished he had more time to write and to create and less stuff going on. So it's a universal thing. So one of the things I have to just remember that where I am is okay. And she says, most individuals have never had enough time, and they've never had enough resources, and they've never had enough support or patronage or reward, and yet they still persist in creating.
Yeah.
They persist because they care. They persist because they are called to be makers by any means necessary. And I know that really gets me, because it's really great to know, no, this is totally normal. You're fine. Just carry on.
Exactly.
So if you're out there and it's uphill, it's okay. Just carry on. Persistence, you know.
Yes. And yeah, that's great. Okay, that's us for today.
Brilliant.
So we shall be back next week with
trust. That was, see what we find in there. Lovely. Thank you very much.
Bye. Bye.